formats. In the last couple of months, we had a comparable format, which we called STL, Celix Thursday Live. So we changed this format. One of the reasons is it's Tuesday today, right? So that's one of the reasons. But the bigger reason is that we also started to just kind of like reflect a little bit. We listened to your feedback. We tried to really understand what you were saying in the last couple of months. And one of the big things that we heard is that there's a huge need to go into advertising even deeper. Even deeper. It's one of the top topics in Amazon. There are many questions around it. There are many things happening. So in this new format, in this new show, we want to go deep into the most important topics in Amazon advertising. And I'm not alone. Yasser, so for those of you that know Yasser, Yasser has been here for many times in the last couple of shows. But Yasser, for those of you that don't know you yet,
of course,
who are you? What are you doing?
Perfect. So yeah, thanks for the intro, Thomas. I'm very excited to be here. First episode. Yeah, now it's about advertising, only about advertising, my favorite topic. So I'm very excited. Yeah, my name is Yasser Sakan. I'm strategic account manager at Celix. So I support our bigger brands. On anything around Amazon, right? Especially with advertising, though. That's a big part of my work usually. Yeah, it's my day-to-day thing. And I'm excited to be here. Yeah, today. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Yasser. Yasser, for those of you that don't know Yasser, Yasser is indeed one of the biggest experts in the industry here at Celix, worked with hundreds of brands around the world, help them to grow, and will also really help us when we'll go deeper into certain topics, just to share his experience, his insights, so that we get the full picture. So for those of you that don't know me yet, I'm Thomas. I am the CMO of Celix, but I'm also a very, very, very passionate advertiser myself. I've been in advertising and PPC for more than 15 years, more than 10 years focused on Google and all the traditional performance marketing channels. In the last years, really focusing, doubling down into Amazon, which I think is one of the biggest and most exciting places to be when it really comes around advertising. So very excited to talk about some of the topics which I really, thought and talked a lot about in the last 15 years. And this is bids and budgets. It's one of the most important topics for anyone that tries to do advertising on Amazon. And today we really want to go deep into different bid strategies, budget strategies for the so-called Turkey 5. Turkey 5, this is Thanksgiving starting this Thursday, Black Friday, then the weekend, 3 and 4, and then Cyber Monday. Amazon named these 5 days the Turkey 5, just giving them a name, giving them a brand, because they're incredibly important for everyone that sells on Amazon. So before we get going, hi Isabel. So I see that already first have really figured out that we have a chat option, which is great, right? So this is a live show. So Yasser and I will try to interact as much as possible, address your questions, trying to share our own experience, our own thoughts on any of the challenges or questions you might have. So please use the chat, use the Q&A, and just to get everyone familiar with the chat function, if you could just very quickly write in the chat from where you're joining today, right? So just that we know a little bit from where you're joining today, and we will cover a couple of marketplaces today where things will behave slightly different. So this will just help us to get some feeling. So Johan is joining from New York, Geneva from Toronto, Canada, Richard from Virginia, USA, Erica from Springfield, Isabel from UK, and is from Riverside, California. Spuzio is from Toronto, Isabel from London, Steve from Louisville, Javier from Mexico City, Nathan from Colorado, Poe from Hood River, Oregon, Kamlesh from London, then quite a long name from India. I just will shortcut it as DNB. And I also think many more, so feel free just to drop the city, but it helps us already get a feeling. So we have many from the US today, many from North America, including Canada and Mexico. That is great because we also cover many of the insights which are specifically relevant for the US market. So before we kick off to go directly deeper into the data and basically bids and budgets and what we really want to understand today, Yasser, right? So let's probably go one step back. I mean, we talked in the last couple of shows a little bit about this. Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Turkey 5. I think everyone knows that this is a big thing. It's a big thing every year. It has been a big thing every year for the last couple of years. But this year is different.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think because of COVID as well, right? We've seen some big changes, e-commerce in general, Amazon picking up a lot. And a lot of it is accumulating in Q4 now, right? Around these special days. We've seen it in Prime Day. There was big expectations. Prime Day, though, I have to say, was a little bit different, right? Because Prime Day is not usually during the time. Yeah, it's usually in the summer. So the advertising, Amazon didn't have the time to run it up, to prepare for the advertising. And it wasn't as big as we expected it. Yeah, but I think for Q4 and the Turkey 5, it will be as big as a lot of people expect it to be, right? And now it's about being prepared and bits and budgets, right? The bread and butter to set these right. And I think we do have the data for it for the last years, to see, okay, how much bigger is it going to be, right? How much do we need to increase the budgets? How much do we need to increase the bits in order to be prepared? So I think we look at that. Another big difference is this year around, a lot of the promotions have started much earlier, right? So that's another main difference. We've seen that Amazon itself was pushing sellers to do promotions earlier, just for the fulfillment centers, because they know it's Q4 in general will put a lot of stress on the fulfillment centers, and especially now with COVID and retails, brick and mortar being closed, it's even more so stressful for the fulfillment centers. So they try to spread this out a week or even 2 weeks earlier, to do the promotions as early as possible. And I can see here in Germany, for example, I hear on the radio a lot of Amazon advertising on the radio that people should start now, and the promotions are running now, basically, right? To really spread this time period out and alleviate a little bit of that pressure from the fulfillment centers.
Yeah, thank you, Yasser. I think what you're touching on here are already two very, very important things, which we will now see when we go deeper into the data. There are basically two things which we need to look at if we want to understand what is now the right budget strategy and the right bid strategy for you throughout the upcoming days. Number one is looking at the past, understanding what happened 2019. What were the normal behaviors from Thanksgiving to Black Friday, over the weekend to Cyber Monday? So that's number one, that we really need to understand if we want to understand what can we learn from that and how can we really, really, really get the most out of the dynamics that could have been observed in the last couple of years. But then there's a second thing, which we also need to deeply understand. And Yasser, you're just touching on this, because this year is not necessarily exactly as 2019 was. And there are a few reasons. We covered some of them in the past shows. We will not go into them in depth today. We'll just cover them very top level, only the things that are critical to really understand how they influence us in our bid and budget strategies. And one of the effects can be already seen here. So Yasser, you mentioned this. This was generally the COVID-19 uptake, which we saw round about March, April this year, where we have seen like this big boost in e-commerce. And this boost in e-commerce also has scaled to basically advertising. The scale to advertising, that revenue went up, but also CPCs actually were stable, even down, conversion rates were up. It was a very good time for most advertisers this year. And now, being much closer to Black Friday, Cyber Monday, this also might have some influences when we'll talk about specific bids and budgets.
Thomas, when we look at, sorry to interrupt, when we look at this graph, are we showing revenue? Are we showing ad revenue? Maybe you can explain a little bit further.
Yes, so this is ad revenue, right? So this is ad revenue, very good question. Yes, this is ad revenue, right? Which we basically normalized here throughout the quarters. We see this big, like we see this normal 20, 30% jump, that you observe at Amazon pretty much every year. But then we saw this big significant jump round about March, April. This was when all the lockdowns around the world happened, first in Asia, then in Europe, then in the US. And this has pretty much caused this very, very big jump. It stayed on that level. It has slightly decreased in the last 2 or 3 months. So it's not that high as you see on this chart anymore, but it's still significantly higher. And this has one of the implications which we'll go deeper into. But before we do this and before we really go deeper also into these effects, let's first try to understand what actually happened last year, because this normally is a beautiful prediction what will happen this year. So let's go back here. And I think the first thing which I really want to focus at is budget, right? Before we go into bids, I think budgets is a very, very big important topic. It's a question which we hear a lot. It's a question where there's also a lot of uncertainty because budget increases, they come naturally with quite some significant risk. If you're increasing your budget, you can also very quickly burn money, especially in these 5 days where there will be a high volatility. So what can you do? What should you do? And one of the first things that we can do here is to look at last year. So what we did here, we did a data study. We do many, many data studies here at Celix. And one of the things that we did is to look at a big sample set of more than 1,000 advertisers across all categories around the world, across the big marketplaces. We aggregated them, we anonymized them, and we tried to understand what are the different dynamics from a top level when we think about the different KPIs and how they evolve throughout the 5 days. So what we're starting here with is basically the spend levels. And the percentage figures that you see here, these are the increases to the average of October of 2019. So we looked at the average of the spent budget in October 2019. And now we compared the average spend now on all of these 5 days versus that, so that we could roughly more or less estimate how much on average does the spend increase throughout these 5 days across the board. And as we also know that there are quite some significant differences between the marketplaces, US, Germany, and UK are the 3 ones that we're looking deeper into here. We also divided this so that we can really ensure to come up with the right conclusions. So let's start with one example. So if we now go to the US, we have many people joining us today from America. And what we see here is Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, you see a 14% average increase in spend compared to October. So overall, not a big increase. It's kind of like, very close to daily fluctuations. For some, it's higher, for some, it's lower. But normally, Thanksgiving, not so much, at least last year, has happened. This changed Friday. Black Friday, there is a sharp increase to 74%, so almost double, which is a significant increase. And also, when we then think about how this continues, the second highest day in the US. The highest is Cyber Monday with 104%. So if you think about the dynamics in the US, you basically have this first big peak, which is Black Friday. Then, very important, it still stays high over the weekend, where we still have a more or less 50% increase. And then again, it reaches its peak to 104%. So in average, we're talking roughly about 57% more spent than normally occurs on any given day in October. If we now jump to Germany and the UK, it gets quite interesting. Because from a top level, right, if we look at the average over the Turkey 5, the 5 days from Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Cyber Monday, then the average increase is in all 3 markets around 50%, right? 57 in the US, 45 in Germany, 55 in the UK. If we now, however, look into the specific development throughout these 5 days in Germany and the UK, you see a very different picture. What's happening in Germany? In Germany and in the UK, the biggest day is actually Black Friday. This is in 3 days. So in Germany and UK, the big main day last year is not Cyber Monday, is Black Friday, different than to the US. So if you compare here in Germany, it's even quite radical, where we have 68 versus 38. So lots of stuff happens already on Black Friday. And in the UK, comparable. On higher levels though, 94%, biggest day in the UK by far, and then followed by Cyber Monday, which happens on Monday. You will also notice that the Sunday before Cyber Monday plays a much bigger role in Germany and the UK, as it's almost as high as Cyber Monday in Germany, even higher, in the UK, the same, right? So if you think about this, then the development throughout these 5 days from a budget spend perspective is very different when it comes to the US, Germany, and UK. So if we try to look at this from a chart perspective, what you see here on this slide, if we start, let's say, with the US, which is the blue line, it starts low, increases up to 75% on Black Friday, goes down and stays more or less around the 50% increase, and then jumps up again of more than 100%, big peak in the US on Cyber Monday to be expected. In Germany and UK, it's different. The peak already happens this Friday. So if you're selling in Germany or the UK, it's incredibly important to really get the most of this Friday, because this, historically at least, is the bigger day in most of the European marketplaces. It then stays high over the weekend, especially on Sunday. On Sunday, we actually have the day that behaves almost for everyone the same, with a difference that afterwards, the US skyrockets, and Germany and the UK more or less say similar. So I think a very big first important thing to keep in mind, if you now look at the budgets from last year, and if you want to use these average budgets as a rough understanding how much you can expect that you will spend more, then this is normally a very good indication. But be aware that Black Friday will be bigger in Germany and UK, and Cyber Monday is the big peak day in the US. Before we now touch on the question, what does this now specifically mean for your budget and what should you do with your budget, right? Because the question now remains, should I now change every day my budget exactly like this? Does it make sense? Does not make sense? I first want to pause here because I see there's already some first questions. But before I jump into the concrete conclusions, Yasser, did this surprise you, right? If you look at the different dynamics between Germany, UK, and the US.
I mean, it's definitely interesting to see from the German perspective. Yeah, since we're here in Germany, I do feel like Black Friday is more prominent than Cyber Monday, right? So I think it's a more common thing. You hear it more often. You hear the promotions and see the promotions more often. So that's probably the reason. Yeah, I would suggest. Maybe our viewers can tell us how it is in the US, right? Is Cyber Monday really that much bigger? Like in terms of, do people know much more about it? Yeah, or is it the bigger event? In your perception, do you see it as the bigger event, or maybe we can ask, right?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So if everyone can share from the US and Germany, some anecdotal insights in the chat, that's definitely helpful. While you can do this, I would quickly address some of the first two questions which we have. So Chris is asking, all the data is from Amazon or an analysis on Celix data from your customers. Want to understand the sample size we're talking here. Very good question. So this is from Celix. It's not officially from Amazon. So of course there can be some, let's say, fluctuations, but our data scientist teams selected a sample which should be statistically very representative for all of the three markets, for the US, for Germany, and the UK. So we're talking in each group more than 1,000, which normally helps us to get a very good understanding of what's really happening. And this brings us also to the second question of Marta, which asks, is this same across all categories? Definitely not, right? And this will also bring us to already the concrete recommendation question, because these are average figures, right? These are average figures. Per category, they are indeed very different. And I think I just saw that, you're welcome, Chris, but I think also Nathan already just mentioned one of the important aspects here. Large electronics tend to go big Black Friday and over the weekend. Small electronics are massive on Cyber Monday. Anecdotally, Erica adds, I see Black Friday and Cyber Monday as diverging toward equal importance in the United States. They act as an extended and equal sales period at this point. Again, simply anecdotally and perception-based. Absolutely. And I think if you also go to this, right, I think it's very important to keep in mind that especially in the US, both days are very big, right? It's not that, Black Friday is not big. It's 75% in average. And Cyber Monday is just overall bigger. Does this mean this is bigger for you? Not necessarily, because there are very big fluctuations per category, per subcategory, and per specific products. So one of the things that we definitely recommend, if you already have been active last year throughout this period, you can very quickly, assuming that your budgets were uncapped and that there were not any big other biases that you put in place, you can quickly check how this was looking for you last year. And normally this will be already a very good indicator because it will help you a little bit. How is more or less the flow in your category, in your product? Again, it's not always that we can predict the future with the past, but in this case, looking at the last couple of years, it's normally relatively stable. Of course, some back and forth fluctuations, but normally you can see this. And you should also keep in mind that this is average figures. This means that in average 110%. There are many products which experience up to 300 or 400%. There are other products which only experience 20% or 30%. So it really, really depends in the end on your product and on your category. You can use these figures as some guideline if you don't have any historical data yourself. If you have historical data yourself, you can apply the trend, which in many categories will more or less follow exactly this dynamic. In some others, again, it might be different, but in most it should. And you can use this as some guideline. So there are two options, right, that we generally recommend. One option, if you're really confident that you will be profitable over the 5 days, in doubt, rather increase it more than this so that you're really on the safe side. You don't want to miss out in the most and best profitable days. And we'll talk about this when we talk about bidding. But normally these are very, very profitable days. You don't want to miss out on sales there. So the worst thing you can do is basically run out of budget. So in doubt, rather increase it, monitor it very, very, very closely. And if you see, okay, there's something not working or something not happening, you can still decrease it in real time. But overall, big recommendation, biggest mistake that we've seen so far is that different sellers around the world are rather too early budget capped. They're missing out of a big opportunity over the 5 days, which really, 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 for most out there, are very profitable and basically lose out in very, very important sales. So use these increases roughly as a guide. Try to apply it for your product, your specific category. You can, if you are happy with your performance, add a very, very nice buffer on it by 50%, 100%, even plus, just to ensure that you will not run out of budget. Monitor this through these 5 days. If you see that something is not working, you can decrease, but it's always better to first start higher and then decrease if it doesn't work, rather than you don't even know if it works, because you will basically run out of budget very soon.
Maybe one thing to add, I would even start already now, basically, right? So if you haven't yet increased your budget, start now. This year, everything is a bit earlier, right? So if you bump it up by 25% now to 50%, and later maybe another 100 to 200%, depending on the category you're selling in, if your products are giftable or not, I think that's a good guideline, right? But every industry is different, every category is very different, but that's the ballpark we're talking about.
Yeah, that's the ballpark, right? So because we also see many are just increasing budgets by 20%, 30%, whatever, right? This normally doesn't make sense. Definitely go bigger. Of course, it depends a little bit how your budgets are already, right? So there are also many brands where the budgets are already uncapped and they're basically managing everything just via bids. Then, of course, you should be normally fine, depending how big the gap is. If you don't know how big the gap is, you can just look at the data for last week, look at the overall budget that you have set, look at how much you overall spent, see how big is the gap. If the gap is 80%, you should be normally fine. If the gap is only 10, 20%, or on some campaigns only 10, 20%, then these should definitely be the ones where you can expect much more sales. Double down on them, increase the budget, don't miss out these sales. Then we have two other questions from Marta and Leon. So Marta is asking, do you allocate this budget during all the day or imply increases in determined time so you can participate in more than one event? Good question. So I think it depends a little bit what you're doing. So overall, and what your potential customers are doing, right? But overall, you can definitely expect, and we will see this when we look into a second on bidding, that normally throughout the 5 days, there's lots of interest to buy products, right? People are in a shopping mood, they want to buy it, they want to be there. So across the board, in doubt will make sense to be rather visible than not. Other exceptions? Yes. If you, of course, do specific deals, specific coupons, if you have to certain price reductions that really change your profit margin, where you just have limited stock, all of this can basically adjust the strategy, right? So that you really, really then want to ensure to maximize your profit. But assuming that stock is not a problem, assuming that pricing is not a problem, then it really comes down of maximizing sales. And if you want to do this, then rather adopt across the board, just ensure that this will be not limited. Rather try to adjust your performance by bidding, which we'll touch on in a second, rather than budgets. Because normally bidding is the way that will help you to ensure profitability and maximize also your profit down the road, versus budget should be more a safety net to ensure that you're not burning out of the sun money which you don't have or which you did not plan to basically invest.
Exactly. What I see sometimes is that big brands have their budgets, their yearly budgets, and this is why they use budgeting, right? So while smaller sellers like to control their spend by reducing the bid, right? Because then they can spend as much as they want if they're profitable, right? It's open budgeted. And bigger brands sometimes have a certain budget that they need to spend in a year, and this is why they have higher bids, but put a cap on it with a budget, right? What I like better, what I prefer is actually doing it via the bid, right? Because if you have a certain ACoS, you're profitable, you can spend as much as you want, right? As a seller, you have an open budget. If you're profitable, you're spending. Yeah. So yeah, I think you touched upon a really interesting point here. I'm a bigger fan of controlling your spend via reducing the bid and controlling your bid rather than your budget, right? Because, like I said, if it's a good ACoS, if it's profitable, why not spend more, right?
Yes, and I think this is also the reason why this show is called Bids and Budgets today, right? Because they go very, very hand in hand. You can really control many things via budgets. You can control many things via bids. Many do both. But in an ideal world, you really control them in the long run via bids. But for these very, very big days, which are ahead of us, a budget cap can make sense, right? Just also to ensure that you're not running out, that the risk is not too high, basically. So let's have a quick check on some questions. So I hope that Marta, this addressed your question. Leon is asking, concentrate on increasing my fixed daily budget or work on an average of an entire week or two. So it depends. Personally, I would definitely suggest to do this daily and to monitor this daily. These are 5 big days, right? So if you really want to get most out of this, if there's any time in the year where it's worthwhile focusing on budgets, it's now, right? So if you have definitely the time and the bandwidth, right? So it's definitely highly recommended to check it out really daily to monitor what's happening, what's going on, because many things will happen throughout these 5 days. If you don't have that time because you need to do many other things, then I would suggest to really work with an average, let's say 200% increase. This is something that you've seen will work for you, that has worked in the past. It ensures that you will not run out of budget. Worst case scenario, you would also not burn money. Then you can do this. But otherwise, it's definitely highly recommended, and the same thing will hold true for bidding, to monitor this. These are the 5 most important days of the year when it comes to sales, when it comes to making profit. So it's very, very important to, give it the proper attention whenever possible. Obviously, knowing that it's not always possible, but if it's possible, definitely highly recommended. Usama is asking, what is the best strategy during this time of the year for a new product? We just arrived on Amazon 2 weeks ago and still under ranking. All right, Usama, that is a very good question. Yasser, what would you, it doesn't have to do anything with budgets directly, but we still can probably address it quickly.
Well, if it really depends on a couple of factors, right? Are there already reviews? 2 weeks might be enough to get the first 1 or 2 reviews. Yeah, if there's already reviews, I would start immediately with advertising. Or if the brand is known, right? If you do have some branded traffic and there's already trust, the customers know your brand, they will also buy a new product without reviews. Yeah, but without any brand loyalty, brand search, or any reviews, it will be tough, right? Even if you have a strong promotion, I think it will be tough to push a new product. If you have a few reviews, it's a perfect time, to get things going and use it as a Kickstarter for your product, to launch it really nicely. So it depends on these factors, I would say.
It depends on these factors, but again, I think, Usama, right now, if you are not really promoting the product yet, now might be the right time. Again, even if you have a new product and you want to get sales, many people now want to buy products, but if it's not ranked, you really need to be visible. You need to appear, otherwise they will not buy it. It is competitive, there's no doubt about it. You might need to increase the bids quite radically right now, but it still can pay off. And we'll talk about this in a second. But before I jump into bidding, I just want to quickly touch on the questions from Erica and Martha. So Erica has asked, my PPC ACOS have skyrocketed over the past 2 weeks. That's not great, right? Because increase in ACOS is never good. To now greatly unprofitable. Should I still increase my budget? What can I do to get back down to profitability? It really depends, right? So I think we will need to go much deeper into your specific case to understand why in the first place it has skyrocketed. At the end of the show, we probably will give you some quick tip and tricks which you can quickly do to understand a little bit faster where the big challenges are coming from. And then, you might figure out how can this be solved? Because if a product is not profitable, the Turkey 5, they can make it more profitable, they can increase the sales, but they will not do any magic, right? So if there's any bigger thing wrong or any other thing doesn't work, let's say you don't have any reviews or you have bad reviews or the listing is optimized well, competition has increased, targeting doesn't work, etc., 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 then bids and budgets will also not solve it. So to really, really understand what is happening here, we would need to go deeper into the specific case, Erica, but watch out for the last 5 minutes of today, where we'll come up with some very, very clear next steps that will help you to understand, how you can assess the situation. Marta, your question was, how can you know if you are being profitable if sales data is not available immediately? Very good question. So the good news is that many, many, many customers will buy things relatively fast throughout the Turkey 5. They are in a buying mode. So sales should normally come in relatively quickly. And for most of your products, you will have a history, right? Historical data. And normally what happens is the performance will improve or it will decrease, but it will not be radically different. So if your product already has been working very well, it now might work better, right? Much better. If your product has not worked very well, it now might be okay. If your product has not worked at all, then probably it will also not work at all now. So it really also depends on the historical data. If we will now look at the conversion rates, the bidding, everything, keep in mind that Black Friday, Cyber Monday increases the chances that people will buy products. They're more likely to buy products. They're really, really in a shopping mode, but it will not do any magic, right? So if everything is already wrong or broken before, it will not be fixed. It can improve it, but it will not be fixed, at least not with bids and budgets, right? Then again, we need to talk about many, many other topics that can basically cause the problem. So always try to look at just one thing on this, Yasser. So always, when you think about decisions, right, within the Turkey 5, look at the performance that you had in the last 4 weeks, right, and just expect that there will be fluctuations up and down. But the basis of the performance, the foundation of the performance is basically the performance out of the last 4 weeks that you had. Sorry, as I cut you off.
Yeah, no worries. Just to answer Marta as well, right? So what you can do manually or with some sort of automation, because you do get data quite fast, right? So for each keyword, let's say you have 10, 20 clicks and you can see, did I make a sale? At what ACOS did I make a sale or did I make no sale? Yeah, so you can either manually reduce the bid or put the search term on negative or do it via automation, right? So by putting a budget or limiting your spend via bids, it's tougher, of course, if you have to do it manually, but if you have the automation in place, it's quite easy, because then you say, my target ACOS is 20, and anything that is above 20, I want to reduce the bid. This is, and at the same time, you reduce your spending, of course, when you reduce your bid, and this way you can cap your budget by fixing a target ACOS, basically. So this is because we're very familiar with our tool. It's easy to say from our side, reduce your budget by reducing bids. But of course, if you have to do it manually, I can understand that this is almost impossible across thousands of keywords. But the way we see it is you put a target ACOS and then the automation does it for you, right? If something is more expensive, it will reduce the bid and thus limit your spending as well.
Yes, which already brings us, I think, to the second big topic, which I know that there's some questions, so which are left. Leon, Erica, I'm very happy that this answer helped you. Usama, I will park your question for a second because I would just like, and also everyone that asked in the Q&A, because we want to talk about bidding as well, because I think, you just touched on this, Yasser. It's very difficult to talk just about budgets if we fully ignore bids, because they, in the end, are pretty much the sister/brother of budgets. So we want to go deeper a little bit into bidding and what that means actually now over the Turkey 5. So I know that we have today a very, very diverse and mixed group in terms of know-how, background, context, how much, all of you have already worked within advertising, optimized bids across different campaigns. So we will not spend too much time of providing some context or too much context, but I will have a 3-minute summary of basically how we calculate the perfect bid, because this is very important before we actually can now understand how does this change through the Turkey 5. So let's start with the overall idea, how you basically, what is a good bid? What is a perfect bid? It starts with this example with an average sales price of $100. So let's assume you're selling something $100, right? This can be earphones, right? Earphones will probably have an average sales price, at least, if they're Bluetooth, of probably $100. So this is good. Then the next thing that you need to know is conversion rate, right? Because conversion rate depends what you're selling, depends on the category, but normally conversion rates fluctuate between 3% and 50%. Depending on the product, depending on the industry, depending on the marketplace, the format, everything. But this is more or less what you will see most of the time. So 10%, what does it mean? It means that you need 10 clicks. You need 10 clicks roughly in order to sell one item. In this case, let's say earphones, right? Because conversion rate 10%, 10% means if you have 10 clicks times 10%, one order, one thing having bought. Okay, then the next thing that we need to understand is the target ACoS. Because in the end, we could now argue, okay, if I need 10 clicks, I can just pay $10 per click, because then I am break even, right? Because if I need 10 clicks, I pay $10, and then if I make $100, I'm break even. Unfortunately, this is not true, because there's something else. Your product obviously doesn't come for free. There are shipping costs, there are the product costs, there are all the other costs which your company has, right? So there are thousands of other things which you need to basically reflect if you think about bidding. And this is normally measured with the so-called target ACoS. So this is basically how much you really want to make money and how much you can also afford to basically pay. And in this case, this means that 80%, right, are costs which you just have, right? And the remaining 20%, this is basically what you're able to pay to advertising so that you still break even or that you still reach your goals. So 10% is very important. In this case, sometimes it's 30%, 50%, also depends a lot on the business. And then there's a fourth factor. And the fourth factor, which is really important, is the so-called bid to CPC ratio. Because if you bid, it doesn't mean that you will pay that amount. If you bid $1, it doesn't mean that you will pay $1. You probably will pay 60 cents or 50 cents or even 30 cents. It depends on the so-called bid to CPC ratio.
Or even more.
The bid,
sorry.
Yes.
With some bid adjustments, for top of search, you can end up paying more.
Exactly, or even more, yeah. And the bid to, but we'll talk about this later. But the bid to CPC ratio basically occurs in Amazon and also occurs if you do Facebook or Google or whatever you do, because all of them are based on the so-called second price auction, which essentially means that the auction system looks at the competition, it looks at your bid, it looks at your quality score, and you will basically pay what you need in order to beat the one behind you. This is in the end the CPC that you pay. We will not cover this in depth today, but normally, in most industries, in most ranges, it's something around 1.5. So in this case, the perfect bid would actually be $3. Why? Because if you have $3, right, this means you have a conversion rate of 10%, right? So you'll probably pay $30. You will do bidding, but the bid to CPC ratio is 1.5. So in fact, you will pay $20 for any sale. Your target ACoS is 20% out of the $100. So this is exactly $20. So $3 is the perfect bid. If this is very familiar to you, then that's great, and thanks for your patience. If this is not familiar with you, you probably have learned something. And if this looks bloody complicated, don't worry, because you don't need to understand everything here in detail. The two key things that you now need to understand for Cyber Monday, Black Friday, everything between, and also Thanksgiving, is that these two metrics, they will change. So if you want to calculate your perfect bid, you need to understand these two. What normally will not change is target ACoS, right? Except you want it to change. Then yes, it will change, but normally it is stable. The bid to CPC ratio also normally will remain the same. It might fluctuate a little bit, but no big changes to be expected here. So the two big things which will now change over the 5 days are these first two. Number one is the average sales price, which basically means, are your prices higher or are your consumers willing to pay more, right? So this is something which can be observed. And the second thing is the increase in conversion rate. The average sales price, we will not go into so much depth here. In average, it decreases a little bit, but the biggest factor here is your price. If you change your price, you should reflect this. If it's the same or more or less the same that you normally sell stuff, then you can basically ignore this. But what you cannot ignore, and that's the most important thing, is conversion rate. Because conversion rate is now the remaining big factor, which is the most important factor if you want to understand how you need to adjust your bids. So before I now will go into the top 5, I know that this has been 5 minutes of a lot of formulas, math, KPIs. If someone just in the chat could tell me that this makes actually sense, or that this was understandable, then we can continue. Does this example here make sense? If anyone can just, perfect. Okay, cool, good. Okay, so I'm not talking some random stuff because I know it's always very difficult. We don't know how much you're really dealing with these kind of stuff. People like myself deal with this every day since 15 years. This comes more natural to me, but I obviously also understand that many are not doing this for 15 years every day. So then this is different. So conversion rate, however, this is the most important thing that you need to keep in mind. This is the thing that really matters when we now think about the Turkey 5. So let's again look a little bit into what basically is now happening, right? And what we now see here in the first chart, this is now the chart continued in the US ad revenue. And we see here already it slightly has went down, as mentioned. Prime Day was a little bit lower than last year. And we talked in our Prime Day show about this, the reasons of this. I think this still was not a big surprise. I think many saw that coming. But now we're basically more or less at the normal 20% above average level that we would normally expect. And now we're coming very close to Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So if we now look at last year, what really happened in these 5 days, and we first look at ad revenue, this is, we look at the spend at the beginning when we look at budgets, but the other half of it, right, the other half of the coin is the ad revenue, which is generated. And you see here already one thing which is quite interesting, because you see here that the numbers are higher. So on average, we see 152%, Black Friday 100%. If you remember what we basically looked at the beginning, these numbers were lower, right? They were significantly lower. Why has there been more revenue generated? Fantastic question. The reason why more revenue has been generated comes basically down to a couple of things. Number one, if we look at ACoS. So ACoS is obviously an incredible important metric. And what we see here, the first drop, this is Black Friday. The second drop is Cyber Monday. And in the case of ACoS, this is a very good thing, because when ACoS goes down, this means that normally profitability goes up. So we see here that last year, on average, Black Friday has, for the average brands, have observed a 12% decrease in ACoS, Cyber Monday 21%. So this is great news. And if you also, and this is something which we'll touch on at the end of the show, if you even look at the time afterwards, up to the 21st of December, you see the beautiful ACOS Valley, right? Something which I will touch on in the last 10 minutes, because it's, in my opinion, one of the biggest opportunities of the year that people neglect, because they all focus, like we today, on this beautiful red box. They ignore this, right? Where you also see, obviously, that ACOS will continue to be on a very, very low level. But let's park this for a second. We first want to talk about the Turkey 5. And in this Turkey 5, you will see that ACOS is down. Why is this the case? Conversion rate. So what you now see here, and this is again, remembering, if we want to understand bidding, we need to understand conversion rate. So if we now look at what happened with average conversion rates, 2019, across the board, when we look at the Turkey 5 and also afterwards. And what you will see here, so Thanksgiving, slight drop, minus 9%. Then Black Friday, more or less plus 9%. Then it more or less stabilizes, and then it increases to 21% on Cyber Monday. Then it goes down, but not so much down. It's still plus 10%, right? And then it starts to increase, and reaches almost levels of Cyber Monday at roughly the second, third week of December, even crosses Black Friday here. So if you want to understand basically the main reason why ACOS goes down and continues to go down, then this slide is the explanation. It is because conversion rates go higher. Now, you normally could argue, okay, conversion rates go higher, but also bidding gets more expensive, CPCs get more expensive, so they net out each other. You see already here that this is not happening because ACOS goes down. And the reason is indeed because CPCs, right, they are slightly increasing, at least for Cyber Monday, Black Friday, but only marginal, like almost daily fluctuations, not radical. And then they more or less are the same. They even drop afterwards, right, in the week after Cyber Monday. And then they're again more or less stable. So CPC, funny enough, are more or less stable throughout this crazy time, which means that many are not increasing their bids, while conversion rates at the same time pretty much skyrocket. So the highest time of the year. So what does it mean for bidding? So for bidding, this basically means, let's go deeper into conversion rate. You can, if you look at your bidding, you can really follow this, basically this chart, right? This chart more or less indicates, again, an average. This might be very different for you. And the same thing that you can do again is looking at your own performance for 2019 and see how this has evolved for you. But very likely you will see a very comparable trend, can be even a little bit sharper, can be slightly lower, depending what you sell. But normally across the board, conversion rates go up. So what you can do easily, just to basically maintain your ACOS, at least increase the bids by 10, 20, up to 30, 40% in this period. This is what you can do at least. If you really want to be safe, you can also drop it over the weekend, but not too much, a little bit, right? You can drop it a little bit if you really want to optimize it in a very high degree. But overall, you'll be very well off if you just increase the bids by 30%, at least. And why do I say at least? Because this effect here, it's not covered basically, on this slide, but if not many others will increase their bids radically, this means that you can increase your bids, but you will not pay much more due to exactly this effect, the bid to CPC ratio. So even if you might increase them by 80%, your bids will probably just increase by 30%, like your CPCs will increase by 30%. However, you will get much more exposure. So one of the most common mistakes, which happens across the board, is to be too cautious over this period in the year of increasing bids. So the big recommendations that we also can just have here is don't be scared or afraid of increasing bids in pretty much the majority of all cases, right? You will see this in your account if you look at conversion rate, and you will see that the normal bid increases will definitely be worthwhile and your ACOS will still go down, right? It goes down even with the bid increases that we've seen. If you increase them radically, then potentially this curve will be stable for you. But in that case, your sales will, however, skyrocket. So don't be afraid of increasing bids. Monitor your ACoS, right? If your ACoS tends to go down, increase bids even more if you want to maximize sales, because this will really, really help you to maximize your reach. So I will pause for a second. I know, again, many charts, but from a summary perspective, here a little bit in a more visual, appealing way, right? So you can now slowly start to increase bids. We suggest to at least increase bids by 30% for Black Friday, Cyber Monday. You can decrease them here, you don't need to. And afterwards, keep them high. Keep them high up to more or less the 20th of December. This is a beautiful time. It's normally the most profitable time. Most people don't know, but it's normally the most profitable time for any brand out there. So this is where you really, really want to capture as much sales as possible. This is the time where everyone wants to buy. You want to appear. And then it radically changes roughly around the 20th of December. This is the moment when you then need to decrease them again. But overall, this is a quick summary, which brings me to the questions. So Richard has a first question. When you refer to conversions, is that the ad conversion rate or the over unit session percentage in terms of the perfect bid? That is a very good question. So we're talking here about the normal ad conversion rate, right? So the normal conversion rate, that basically if someone clicks on your ads and buy your products, right? This is normally also the one that you will see. But again, even if you kind of like track conversions differently, a different attribution window, if you track on sessions, cross device, etc., in this time of the year, this will not make a big difference. In this time of the year, the conversion rate, doesn't matter how much you really measure it, will actually go and follow this path. Okay, I know this was a lot of slides, a lot of content, many charts. I apologize for that, but we know we really wanted to go a little bit deeper into this and basically try to explain where this is coming from. That is not just, Yasser and me sitting at the bar and coming up with something. There's really lots of insights, data, experience, and tests that come to this, and we really make a difference. Yasser, when you think about this, what are your thoughts? When you look at this?
What I really like about advertising is you see the data, you see a lot of numbers, but it's all psychology at the end of the day. If you go back to the conversion rate chart, could you just go back one to the conversion rate chart, the wider one, right, where we have the period before. So see here, right before Black Friday, Cyber Monday, we have a normal conversion rate. People are just waiting for these events. This is the way I see it, right? To see, okay, if the items they want to buy, they want to gift, their friends and family are going to be reduced. They might not be reduced, and what happens, either they buy then or after, but they hold on, right? They hold on until these 2 days, and then the conversion rate goes up and stays up, right? So it's always, for me, I like to see the psychology behind it. Why do we see these charts? Why are these numbers the way they are, right? And this is my interpretation, I guess.
I love it.
Buy something, I want to wait, see if there's an offer, and buy it maybe on the offer or after. As we can see here as well.
I love to hear that, yes, all right. So I'm not the only one that gets crazily excited, when I see these charts, because I really think these are big opportunities. And what we try to do with Amazon Advertising Insights by Celix, this is the first episode, but with this format, what we'll try to do, and this is a good example, we really try to go deeper into certain topics where we just hear that there are many questions and there are many needs. They can be incredibly powerful to grow your business. So we will pick them out, like today with the Tricky 5. We will go deep into them. We look at the data, we look at the insights, we look at different cases, and then we'll try to come up with very specific strategies, which in this case, if you missed what we talked about in the last 55 minutes, here probably a very, very quick summary. Number one, increase your budgets, right? And ensure that they are not capped. In most cases, this will make lots of sense for you, especially, right, if you know that you will be profitable or more or less profitable, then, and you have enough inventory, etc., then this definitely makes sense. Number two, increase your bids. Also, this only applies if, again, you're profitable, makes sense for you, you want to get more sales. But if you do so, like the other 90%, then the most common mistake is that you are increasing your bids not enough. So definitely something which is important, at least 30%, but you can also play with higher ones. You always can revert back, right? So kind of like think a little bit about that range. Number 3, if you are using dynamic bidding in Amazon, most people just use dynamic down. Now will be the time to change it to dynamic up and down. Can also make a big difference. Amazon will help you to increase the bids in this time. Definitely do it. Can also help to really boost your sales. It's a one-click thing, definitely worthwhile the time if you haven't done that. If you have time, or if you kind of like, want to go even deeper to this, there are thousands of more things you can do. We don't have enough time to go through all of that in detail, but there are also other stuff from placement bids. You can improve or maximize your placement bids. You can maximize certain ad formats, certain targeting depths, etc., etc. We'll not cover this today in depth due to the period of time, but of course, everything that you have here at the top can also go much deeper. So if you're using different ad formats, if you're also using different, more sophisticated bid strategies, the same logic applies, right? So you also can do this basically in that dimensions. And one last thing to really call out, if you use coupons or discounts or deal of the day, etc., this plays a big role when it comes to profitability. So also try more or less to balance this. It's sometimes better to have a lower price decrease or lower coupon and rather increase the bids than the other way around, right? So I always see these things more or less as a mix, as a combination, because you can sacrifice part of your margins with coupon codes, or you can basically sacrifice it via higher bids, and it's worthwhile playing with both, right? And especially on Black Friday, Cyber Monday, it can make more sense with bidding.
Thomas, one more thing to add. Can I just add one more thing as a tip? Yeah, very quickly. When you increase your bids, you have already a number of keywords where you've already found a bid that works for you. Yeah, make sure you increase them by percentage, not by absolute values, right? So don't increase them by $1 US or euro. Increase it by 20%, 25%. Always use percentage. And when you use the dynamic bidding, what you can do to be on the safe side, use up and down for your well-performing campaigns, the ones that are below your target ACOS, for example, and keep down only, for example, and just increase the bid a little bit for the ones that are already expensive. Just to add on to this.
Thank you, Yasser. Okay, we're running out of time. There are a few last questions. I just want to very, very quickly touch on them. Richard, thanks for the feedback. Very appreciated. Jeffrey, is there a document or blog which we can access this later to? Yes, we have some information. If you go to Selex on the Q4 of the century, you will find a couple of things there. But if you want to go deeper into what we just covered, there's also a dedicated closed community. And this comes back to what we had before. I think the question that, was it Erica? Yes, it was Erica. So one thing that I can recommend to Erica and to all of you, if you haven't done that yet, what you can do, go just to the Selex page and use the benchmarker. Use the Selex benchmarker. It is free. It is a free report. It happens in 2 clicks. You get a detailed analysis of your KPIs and of your activity in the last 30 days, benchmarked versus the rest in your category. So it will really help you to understand how good is your CPC, conversion rate, CTR, conversion rate, all of that, right? So you'll see the big 4 compared. You will get this nice report. In that report, as soon as you get it, you will also get access to a closed group. You will get access to a closed group around the Selex benchmarker. But in that group, we also go into all of these topics in a much deeper way. So if you have any questions and you have very specific questions, feel free, do the benchmarker, join the group, talk with us, and we are more than willing to help you to really, really get the most out of Amazon advertising and to get the most out of this. And then let me quickly check. Usama, up and down for all campaigns or exact only? Depends for those that make sense for you. If all of them are profitable or more or less profitable, the ACOS is okay. For all of them, for those who are not very happy with profitability, you basically obviously don't need this. Depends, how not profitable they are, but also ordered by profitability. Marta, thanks so much for the feedback. This is really helpful for us. This is a format which we really now try. It's supposed to be to the point, data-driven with you, really trying to use the data, the insights, everything that we have to really help you to grow your business and to also tackle some of the biggest challenges in the industry. And Erica, thank you for the very feedback as well. Love that feedback, Erica. Again, join us in that group. We probably will figure out a way. This feedback is very helpful for us. Thank you, Avi. That's all fantastic to hear. And Jeffrey, yes, we can expect more. This was episode number 1. It's not supposed to be the last one. So we're aiming not to end the series at episode 1. We still will try to figure out if we do this bi-weekly or in which format we do. But this feedback already really helps us to see that it's worthwhile all of our time. So really appreciate it. Thank you so much. We wish, most importantly, all of you a fantastic Turkey 5. Enjoy the 5 days, get the most out of it. If you have any questions, you can reach us in real time if you join the closed group, talk with us, share any feedback, thoughts, and we will really try to address them and to help you. And for now, enjoy the Tuesday and a very exciting week ahead of you.